This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Obviously, just the guys' effort all the way through the season. It takes a ton of sacrifice, a ton of buy-in, and obviously a lot of execution by everybody. And you need everybody at different moments. It's obviously a lot of ups and downs, and we're not going to take this opportunity playing the playoffs for granted because not every team gets there, and it's a privilege, and I try to make the most of it here.
You know, as I told the guys after the game, there's the 82 regular season games. It's a roller coaster ride. There's ups and downs, and but with this group there was so many more ups and downs, and anytime a little adversity hit, these guys found a way to navigate their way through it. But they were a pretty consistent group all the way through, both offensively and defensively, and most notably defensively. We've really had a strong year in that department. Our goaltending has been great, but a strong effort to be better in that area, and it's helped our game. And our offense has still kind of been where it's been in past years, with a little bit of turnover in our lineup. So been a great group to coach, and like I said, now this is your hard work's paying off, and now you don't waste it, because every shift, every moment is it's heightened, and it's why we do it. It's the fun time of year. And so I want to enjoy it, but a lot of work ahead now.
Oh, yeah. Well, look at me. I'm dark. I can't see myself. What is that?
You're going dark for the playoffs.
Instead of the white.
You want to
out,
refresh? I can carry it. For
right,
30 seconds.
I'm gonna
let you do that.
I'll refresh and see what happens.
There you go.
Oh, look at that.
Somebody paid the electric bill at the Linnelli household. We have to remember that. I don't know what the ratio is. Steve can probably tell us. Probably the majority of our audience is still on audio. So they don't know what we're laughing about when you show up on the screen in complete darkness.
Good point. Yeah, they're like, what's going on? Yeah, see, I'm just
Steve said
freezing
correct.
out.
Audio listeners,
Yeah.
Greg's camera was malfunctioning.
I wonder if I can just take my
You were
camera
like
off
the
for a
16
second.
teams that are going dark because they didn't make the playoffs, which I really liked Ryan McDonough's comment. So he had been in the NHL playoffs every year that he'd been in the NHL until last year. And he was talking about how it's a privilege to be able to play in the playoffs.
That's an incredible
And I think
stat,
he
by the
knows
way.
that, but particularly after missing last year for the first time in his career, I don't know if he feels like he appreciates it more. I mean, he's enough of a veteran to know that not every team, not every player in the league, half the players in the league, thereabouts, are not going to play in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So it is a privilege. It's a good reminder about expectations. Fans have very high expectations. When you have a good team that you're cheering for, you have high expectations.
Are they unrealistic expectations or high expectations, or are they one and the same?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the team. The Ottawa Senators fan base is thrilled that they are back in the playoffs after missing for 7-8 years. 2017 was the last year that they were in the playoffs. So are there expectations that they're going to win the Stanley Cup this year? I don't know about that. What about the fan base of the Winnipeg Jets, though? Their team just won the President's Trophy. If they go out in the first round, the feeling in Winnipeg will be way different than if Ottawa goes out in the first round. So it's different from fan base to fan base, but generally speaking, when a team loses, I mean, I see some of the comments. A team might win 2 rounds and they lose in the conference final, and the fans are very upset. It's like they did win 2 rounds.
Sure.
They got to the Final Four. That's hard to do.
That is hard to do.
I mean, how upset were Lightning fans when they lost to Washington in 2018, losing games 6 and 7 when they were up 3-2? They were pretty upset. It was still a great season for the Lightning, and they ended up losing to a team that really hit its stride. Isn't it funny, Greg? There are some teams that they win a series, and that series almost turbocharges them. And in many instances, like George Richards talked about the Panthers beating the Lightning last year as slaying the dragon. I didn't really view it that way. I mean, the Panthers were way ahead of the Lightning in the standings in the regular season. They were heavily favored to win that series, and they did win that series. And I'm not sure that it had the same effect on the Panthers, but I think back to how the Capitals beat the Penguins in the second round in 2018. And that was slaying the dragon for Washington. Because, I mean,
Heck yeah.
those Washington teams had lost to Pittsburgh. Previous Washington teams had lost to Pittsburgh back in the 90s. It was just one of those series, like the Washington franchise had a lot of trouble with the Pittsburgh franchise, and the Ovechkin group had a lot of problems with the Crosby group. And when they finally won that series, they were playing well anyway. They took off, and they were a handful for the Lightning. In some ways, the Lightning were fortunate to get to 7 games in that series. So how do you view a playoff run where you win 2 rounds and lose in the semifinals? Hopefully you feel appreciative, but it doesn't always work that way. But McDonough's mindset is, this is an opportunity. Let's cherish this opportunity and try and make the most of it, which I think is probably the healthiest way to look at it.
I think it is, because I think, every year while the core is there, it's the same for the Lightning basically over the last handful of years. You do have some different pieces there. And not only different pieces, partner, but players maybe who have been with you, but maybe are taking on a different role. And so I think it's one thing to do it in the regular season. It's another thing to do it in the postseason when you're down 0-2 and you need a desperation win.
Yeah.
We talk about playoff hockey being different than the regular season hockey. And I do think playoff hockey, out of all of the sports, when it comes to the postseason, is drastically different than the regular season. And people often ask, they'll say, well, why do you think that is, Greg? And, I tell them, listen to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio from noon to 1, and I'll let you know.
Shameless self-promotion.
But when I am feeling very, very generous, and I will talk about all these things, which obviously I'm joking, there are a couple of things that come to mind. One, the officiating does change drastically. It's not just a little bit. I think it changes drastically. And I think that's a problem in the NHL that nobody really talks about. I do think consistent officiating throughout regular season, postseason should be applied. I understand there are exceptions to the rule. And one of the frustrating phrases I often hear is, well, they're letting the players decide. And look, your dog agrees.
Yeah, Roxy
agrees.
hates that.
Yeah. It's the same as pick up the stick for me.
Mm-hmm.
When you take away a potential weapon from a team who can rely on the power play for offense, because that is part of the game, because your notion is we are going to call the games differently in the postseason, I actually think that's borderline egregious, because I think that's impactful. It just is. You shouldn't be penalized if you've got a really good special teams. And if your power play is a big one, and it's neutered to a degree because playoff hockey's different.
Do we see that in other sports? We really don't. A foul in basketball is still a foul in basketball,
It is.
whether it's game 5 of the regular season or game 5 of the NBA Finals.
It's probably more with a star player.
I mean, shooting free throws, though, is less impactful than getting a power play, maybe. But it's not like the strike zone changes in baseball playoffs.
In the NFL, they can't help themselves calling penalties. I mean, it's like, there's a holding call. We're going to call it. I mean, it's almost the opposite. So I understand that going
I wonder about soccer. I don't know enough about soccer, actually. Like in the World Cup, are they less likely? I mean, most fouls in soccer don't lead to opportunities to score, but penalty kicks, I don't know about that.
I'm the wrong person to talk to. If they were playing outside here, you know what I always tell? I'd close my blind, shut the door, and say, tell me when that soccer's over, and then I'll come out there and greet you. I mean, that's the other one where you touch somebody, and it's like you hammer them. And then
that's a little bit of the culture of the sport.
It is. And so I get that. But when people ask, why is it different? One, it's the officiating. 100% for me. Two, players just find a different level of desperation that you don't see. So you think sometimes getting shots through in the regular season is difficult. Well, wait till you get to the postseason when you have Braden Point getting on the ice blocking shots. Nikita Kucherov, who may do that here and there. Guys do things differently from that perspective in the postseason that you just don't see in the regular season. There's a level of desperation that comes with the territory, but you don't see that in the regular season. And there's various reasons for that. One, you want to pace yourself through an 82-game season. Two, you understand the postseason, this is it, so you lay it all on the line. You've got potentially what? You got to win 16 games, probably going to be more than that in terms of how many games you're playing. So you understand you're going to empty the tank probably more so than anything. Mm-hmm. And then I think the familiarity with the opponent. I don't know if there's much strategy that goes on in a 7-game series. You certainly know the ins and outs, and I think it's sometimes
Coop
harder.
talked about that, actually, about the Panthers. He said, Paul knows everything about us, and I know everything about them, except maybe who's going to be playing in Game 1, although Maurice came out yesterday and said everyone's going to be ready for Game 1.
Correct. So what is that lends itself to a different game, I think a challenging game. Now, look, some people will maybe disagree with me on that, and that's fine. They're wrong, but you can disagree with me on that. And I think the playoffs maybe have changed over the years, when Phil played to where it is now. But I think the premise is still the same, that there's a high level of desperation. Players do things in the postseason that they typically don't do in the regular season. There is the familiarity. You're going 7-game series.
Well, there's familiarity in this series from the beginning. There's familiarity in a series once you get into like the third or fourth game for sure. But, when teams meet in the Stanley Cup final, particularly when it's East versus West, which we've had, for years and years. I mean, the Lightning played the Canadiens in 2021 because we had the conference play. But even that year, it's not like the Lightning had seen the Canadiens at all during the regular season. So when you reach the Stanley Cup final, you're seeing a team that you're not as familiar with, but you get pretty familiar pretty quickly. In this instance, like you look at the Lightning and the Panthers, they know each other. I mean, going back to 2021, the teams are different, but they played last year. Look at LA and Edmonton. I think it's 4 straight years those teams have been in the playoffs. They're not the same teams. In fact, Warren Fogle was on Edmonton and now he's on LA.
Right.
But you get that sometimes in the early rounds.
You do.
I mean, we just talked about Pittsburgh and Washington. They certainly knew each other very, very well
100%.
When they were playing, maybe not every year, but frequently. So, yeah, I think that adds to it. And there are no secrets. Usually, if there are no secrets at the beginning of the series, or maybe if there is a secret or two in the beginning of the series, and I'm not too sure about this player. I haven't seen him a lot. Brian Engblom talks a lot about the feel of kind of what a guy can do. You learn it pretty quickly. I actually want to start just with an overview because this is notable to me. Actually, I have a couple. So the Lightning lost 4-0 last night, which is insignificant.
Was there a game?
Overall, yeah.
Okay.
Well, what it did do was it knocked the Lightning from 3rd to 4th defensively. So that is where they have finished in terms of goals allowed per game. So they finished at 2.63. Vegas was at 2.61.
That is impressive, though.
Yeah, and just as a point of comparison, last year, the Lightning were at 3.26. So that's a significant improvement.
And can I just, before you go, kudos to you, because you had talked about this. I think the number 2.65 is what sticks in my brain. Maybe it was 2.75. You felt like they could get there.
Yeah.
I didn't.
I think we said 2.75 because we said got to get under 3.
You nailed it.
Yeah, and they got under 3.
They did.
And look, Winnipeg led the league 2.32. Like, that is just insane.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Kings have been a really solid defensive team this year. They're second at 2.48, but they're still 0.16 worse than Winnipeg. And then you have, actually, I went to a different toggle here. Then Vegas and the Lightning are right there, 2.61, 2.63, and then the teams are starting to bunch up behind the Lightning. 5-on-5 ratio, even though the Lightning lost 4-0 last night and they gave up a shorthanded goal. So 5-on-5 goals were 3-0 in the negative. They still finished 3rd, 1.30. Remember, they were 0.91 last year. So, look, now we can say definitively this is where they finished this year, and those are huge, incredible improvements.
It really is.
I mean, not many teams improved that substantially in those two areas that are so crucial. As we talked about, we could actually do the final. I didn't think about this when I said I have a couple things to talk about, but let's look at it right now. How many of the top 16 defensive teams got into the playoffs? and I'm just doing a quick scan here, Calgary finished 16th. So the only team, it was 15 out of 16, the only team that got into the playoffs that finished in the bottom half defensively was Montreal. So that tells you. And so for the Lightning to improve, they made the playoffs last year as a bottom half defensive team, but for them to improve as much as they did is really the story of the season. I mean, yeah, they're the individual contributors, Vasilevsky, McDonough, Hagel, Cirelli. I mean, there's a lot of chatter for, Cooch for the Hart Trophy. He led the league in scoring, but I go back to what were they doing at the other end? And they had a really, really good season. There's no disputing that. The numbers tell us. The other thing that I want to mention, because this is noteworthy, that 96-point threshold that I talk about a lot, you get to 96, that should be enough. It's only the second time since they went to this current divisional, 3-division, 2-conference format that with, the division winners and the 2 wild cards, like, you know what I mean, the top 3 and then the 2 wild cards. This current format, Calgary Flames finished with 96 points and missed the playoffs. Now, they finished with 4 straight wins, and they went 7-1-2 in their last 10. So they really hustled to get to 96. Their problem was they lost the tiebreak. So St. Louis also got to 96, and 96 was enough for St. Louis. So this year was another exception to the rule, but as I often say, try and get to 96 after 80. That's the pace. Then you have 2 games left to try and add an extra point, and had Calgary gotten to 96 after 80, all they would have needed was a point in one of their last 2 games. By that logic, they would have finished ahead of St. Louis. But now we can say that it's happened twice. Very rare, though. And in the East, I mean, that fan was asking us about the 1 through 8, like changing the playoff seeding, because I hadn't realized Ottawa actually finished well ahead of New Jersey. Like, New Jersey got in as the 3rd seed in the Metro with 91 points, as did Montreal. Or Montreal got in with 91 points. So 91 was enough to get in the East, and that's low 90s. So
it's incredible.
Yeah,
really, when you
tough for Calgary. I mean, to finish as strongly as they did, a little bit like Columbus finished very strongly too, but Columbus was farther back.
Yeah.
Had St. Louis not gone on that huge streak, Calgary might have gotten in, but they did go on that huge streak, so good for them.
That is part of it. And then, the question's going to be, can that team continue that play? Does it mean anything heading into the playoffs?
Who knows? Yeah.
One of the things that always stood out with me, and I think a lot of people in our business, I actually think athletes and coaches talk about this as well, is momentum. What does that mean? How do you quantify momentum? Oftentimes, I think momentum can be broken up because once that game ends, you have a whole different game the following one. But we also, how do you explain a team who goes on a 10-game winning streak, 15-game winning streak? Maybe they win 9 out of 10. And something Jason Cullimore once told me when I was doing this show by myself a few years back, he had mentioned he doesn't necessarily believe in momentum, he believes in confidence. And I do think there is something to be said for that. Each game is its own entity. But if I'm playing well, there might be a good chance that I can somehow carry over potentially momentum from the previous game to this one. And I do think for some, finishing the regular season on a high note can give you some confidence. But I will tell you that I think that goes away very quickly if you get in game 1, game 2, and you get punched in the mouth and you don't know what's happening. Because, again, we go back to this dynamic between regular season and postseason. The other thing I failed to mention, postseason seems like it happens so much quicker. You know, it's just things are happening, and you're like, wow.
The pressure is higher, and the stakes, the pressure is more, the stakes are higher.
Yes.
But I think teams that bounce back at points in the regular season have it in them to do that in a playoff series. Like the teams that can end losing streaks and just almost by will self-correct. Maybe it's not will. Part of it is will, but also knowing what you need to do to have success, digging in. being mentally tough. Because when you're losing your confidence, to Cully's point, it can be hard to start to feel good about what you're trying to accomplish, the belief that you're going to have success. And I think teams that can dig in and end streaks during the regular season have it in them to bounce back after a tough loss in the playoffs.
I think that's fair.
And I mean, you know, the 2018-19 Lightning didn't really face a lot of adversity during the regular season. This isn't me saying this. I mean, I say it too, but the players said it afterward. That they weren't really forced to dig deep. I mean, they were in earlier years with many of the same players, but that team had never really been punched in the mouth until game one of the playoffs. And, you know, they were dazed and kind of by the time they kind of came to, the series was over, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they started playing a little bit better into the latter part of the series, but they never really got it figured out. The 2015 team, 2014-15, you may remember this, Greg. This, I think, was your first year covering the team. Famously never lost 3 games in a row of any kind, regulation or overtime or shootout, until the final 3 games of the Stanley Cup final.
That's incredible.
So that team did have the capability of ending, like they'd lose one, then they'd win the next one. They'd lose 2, they'd win the next one. And it wasn't until the last 3 games of the Stanley Cup final that they lost the final 3. And look at, like, that team dug in. Like, they had some tough losses. They lost game 5 at home to Detroit in the first round. They had to go to Detroit down 3-2, won that game. They lose game 4 at home to the Rangers when they had grabbed home ice. Got to go to game 5 at New York. They win game 5. They lose game 6 at home. You got to go back to New York for game 7. Remember, the Rangers had never lost a game 7 at Madison Square Garden. The Lightning win that game. So that team kind of had it in them, right? And I think that some of the seeds were planted during the regular season. So I agree with you. Like, everything is magnified in the playoffs. A loss feels worse than it does in the regular season. To the fans, to the coaches, to the players, you don't have that many losses to give until you're out. But I think teams that have that mental fortitude to push back and have shown that during the regular season, it can help them in a playoff series.
I think that's fair. And I think that's why a lot of people probably shouldn't have counted the Lightning out to a degree the way they did, knowing that players have been there, done that. That does mean something, and that you still have the best of the best in net who's going to give you a chance to win every night. It's not going to be a slam dunk. I think we all acknowledge that. But one thing about this Lightning team, you mentioned Ryan McDonough, Victor Hedman, battle-hardened defensemen who have been there, done that, and they will be called upon in a very big way to lead this team through the playoffs. And then you take a look at what you have up front. I mean, Cirelli, Cooch, Point. Now you've had Hagel and Paul experience the postseason a little bit. And I think you can build off of that. Jake Gensel. I mean, look at his pedigree. I think
he doesn't
if guys,
have other than the first year, though, he's had some fairly quick exits. I think he's won 2 rounds, right? He won a round with Carolina last year.
He has. But he's won.
And he's done well in the playoffs.
He gets
just his teams haven't gone
well,
as deep.
And think about
after
where he
the first
came
year.
from. He came from a couple of organizations where the expectations were extremely high. So from the mental perspective, he should be ready to go. He knows what it takes to get in there. And look, you know, you could make the case after that championship run he had with Pittsburgh when he first came up. You know, I think people were looking at the Tampa Bay Lightning as a team that can do a lot of damage in these playoffs. So there's going to be a high expectation, and maybe that's a little bit of a change from the beginning of the year, maybe a lot, which is why we had John Cooper where we had him when it came to, you know, coaches and what he's been able to do. But as far as I'm concerned, and we can get into some of the matchups if we want to later on today, we can do it on Monday. Going to aim to try and get some national guests.
Yeah, and remember, we will have shows this weekend. Just you're not a part of it.
So, yes, I will be listening to you.
The wheels will continue to turn on Saturday and Sunday.
I think the Tampa Bay Lightning, Florida Panthers in the Eastern Conference is the best matchup in the East. I do. West, maybe there's some other ones there that we can have similar conversations.
The Dallas-Colorado series
that's
going to
be a bear.
And I think the Kings-Oilers is intriguing just because of the history.
Yeah.
And the Oilers have won the last 4 years in a row. They met, and the Oilers have knocked out the Kings 3 straight years. This is the first time the Kings have had home ice during this,
and that'll be fun though.
4-year, run basically of them meeting.
So I think for me, not only locally, the NHL is going to get what they want with this matchup. I think a lot of people around the NHL are going to be watching this.
I think that we're going to see when these national pundits make their predictions. We had a fan ask us for our predictions yesterday, and I don't really do predictions when the Lightning are involved. I try and break down, at least in the Lightning series, what I think may be important, and I'll give you a couple actually right now as soon as I finish this thought. But I think the Lightning are going to get some national love, and I think it's in part to how they played this year, and in part due to the fact that there is a perception, which I think is it may be a little bit of a mirage, but there is a perception that the Panthers are going to feel the effects of kind of a mezza regular season where they had, the injuries and the suspension to Ekblad, and where are they going to be? And I think they're going to be ready.
I agree.
I mean, they could very easily win this series. So, but I think the perception around the league is the Lightning have home ice. They have improved from last year. The Panthers maybe have taken a step back toward the pack, which is a fair statement. I mean, there are Panther fans out there listening who are, getting up in arms about it. The Panthers were a complete juggernaut last year. They've lost some pieces. They've tried to adjust and adapt, and we'll see how well they've done that. But I think just looking at their team, looking at their season, they have come back to the pack a little bit from last year. We'll see if that plays out in a playoff series. So as we get closer to game one, in fact, the predictions probably are going to start coming as soon as today and tomorrow before the first 2 series begin on Saturday.
So a little insight.
I think the Lightning are going to get some love from people who are making these predictions. Doesn't mean they're right, but that's what I would expect.
So I'm going to go out on a limb, and I think people who usually don't want to pick a winner, they go 7 as the prediction.
Oh, so you are going to give a prediction?
No, I'm not. I'm just going to tell you. I
didn't want to speak for you.
When you're undecided, you tend to go game 7. That's kind of your cop out, because you can say, well, I can go anywhere. That last game, I bet most predictions nationally are going to say 7 for the series, and that's going to tell you they really don't know who's going to win.
Right.
That's my thing. I think that's what you're going to say. That's the safe play. I could see this game going 7, and the Lightning having that last game at Amalie Arena. You may be right. But when you say 7-game series, that just tells me you don't have a really good feel for how this series is going to go, and you're playing it safe.
The games can be close. Every game can be close, but one team might win all 4 games, the first 4 in close fashion. So, I mean, you never know. A series can be tight. A series can be closely contested, but it can also be short.
Yeah.
You could also have blowouts, and it goes 7, right? Where the teams are trading body blows. So here are a couple of things. I mean, I think there are some common denominators in every series. The special teams battle, even though there may be fewer power plays, although in the first round sometimes that is not the case. Special teams, the end of the series, we look at the special teams. Did one team have a big advantage? That usually can tell us a lot if one team did. The goaltending is certainly a key. Did one goaltender appreciably outperform the other? Or at the very least, one way to look at it is either one goalie kind of exceeded that whole goals above expected, like the one goalie was sensational, or one goalie was spectacularly not sensational, where one goalie was adequate and the other goalie was subpar. Is there a disparity between the 2 goalies? And that is certainly part of it, right? And then I talked yesterday about bounces. Bounces are important. Big plays. It's hard to predict, which team is going to make a big play, but usually the team that wins a series is having more of the big plays go their way than against them. So some stats, in case the fans are wondering. Here are some things to look at as the series is progressing, which may give us a feel for how the series is going. We're going to know it because one team is going to be up or the series is going to be tied. But as it relates specifically to the Lightning, look at the plus minus for McDonough, Chernak, Cirelli, and Hagel. If they are on the wrong side of that, they are minus in the series, that means the Lightning have had a tough time dealing with the top players for Florida.
Sure.
This is a very significant matchup series because the Panthers, while they are a good team, I'm not sure they're quite as deep as they were last year. Their fourth line was really good for them in the playoffs, and they had to replace the entire fourth line. So, really looking at the Barkov line, like, is the Barkov line going to have its way against the Cirelli, Hagel, McDonough, Chernak foursome with a fifth guy, whoever that guy is? And then conversely, are Kucherov and Point plus? Like, what is Gustav Forsling able to do to deny the Lightning's top line? It's not just him, but he's their best defensive defenseman. We talked about that matchup, Forsling and Kucherov. So as we get through the series, look at that. I mean, power play and penalty kill won't affect plus minus, but 5-on-5 play is so important in a playoff series, and I think that those are things to look at, and we can kind of see which way the wind is blowing if the Lightning are on the right side of plus minus, because it's not going to be huge. I mean, it's unlikely that they're going to end up like +7 in the series or -7. But if McDonough and Chernak are like coming in at -3 after 3 or 4 games, that's not good news for the Lightning. Conversely, if they're sitting at +3, that's probably pretty good news for the Lightning as we get into the series. I'm going to give you one more. Mm-hmm. This is especially true if Luke Glendening is unable to play in the series or unable to start the series or is affected in some way in the series. Where is Braden Point's faceoff percentage? He finished under 49%. I think that's where he finished. He was under 49%.
Since he really established himself in the league?
Well, I mean, he's been... I can actually look up his full stats, but I'm going to look up where he finished this year. He was under 49% going into last night's game because he was around 50 most of the year. He finished 48.5%. He lost 26 more faceoffs than he won, but he finished not well because he was right around 50 with a few weeks left in the regular season, so he had some tough games. If Glendening is unable to play / be effective, I think it's important that Braden Point, as the lone right-handed centerman, that he holds his own. Now, I don't think that they're going to necessarily put him out there where Glendening was. They're going to ask a lefty to do it. But if Point starts doing well in the series, maybe they will. And again, this is assuming that Glendening is affected in some way. But even if he's not affected, the Panthers are not as dominant a faceoff team as like Toronto or the Rangers, frankly. The Rangers are a great faceoff team. They have some really high-end faceoff guys. But Barkov is one of the league's best. Power play, Barkov's taking the faceoff. Or Reinhardt if they go to the other side. But with the Lightning heavy on lefties and short on righties, it's probably going to be Barkov. 6-on-5, Barkov is going to take the faceoff. Those are big, big faceoffs. And maybe I should extend it to how are the Lightning going to do against Barkov in the faceoff circle? And more specifically, where is Braden Point's faceoff percentage going to be? I remember it was a few years ago, we had Jeff Halpern on the show, and we don't get assistant coaches often, but this was one time when he joined us, and I think we asked him about Point's faceoff percentage. It might have been going into a playoff run. Yeah. And what he said was, when the stakes go up, Pointer tends to dig in more and do better. And we'd have to look up his playoff faceoff percentage to see if that is true. And this was a few years ago. But if you're a Lightning fan, you hope that's the case. Because he's going to take faceoffs in this series, and you don't want him to be rolling in at 48.5%. I know it's a smaller sample size, but you want him to hold his own. Because he may be the only right-handed faceoff guy the Lightning have. I think this is important in the series. So just a couple of things to monitor. as we
That's actually
as we
a
get
really
into this
good.
thing.
That's a really good point because it's two things. We know how valuable faceoffs are in the playoffs, but we
Last
also
night, the Lightning gave up goals 3 and 4 basically off faceoffs after icings. Actually, Gergensen's won on the fourth goal. Gergensen's won the draw. This is the sort of stuff that drives Phil crazy. He won the faceoff, but Kreider jumped in the circle and stole the puck and then threw it in front, and Zibanejad put it in.
Phil's a big believer. Your line mates have to be just as good,
Right.
in the faceoff circle that the centerman is putting out there. So I get that. I don't think anything annoys Phil more than nobody else jumping into that to help your centerman.
Stella's coming into the camera. She's like, yeah, I agree. Faceoffs are important.
Why not?
Or she's just saying, somebody pet me, please.
And you will.
Yes.
It's the other thing that I took from that comment that you just gave from Halpern is that basically when the stage is a little bit bigger, when the stakes are at their highest, Pointer has a tendency to focus a little
player.
more, right?
I mean, he's always been throughout his career a big game player, and that should translate to faceoffs too.
So you mentioned an interesting point, or brought up an interesting point about Florida's, let's call it, shutdown defense pairing or defensemen and Forsling and McDonough and who they're going to draw. From your observation, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. Has one had more success than the other, shutting down the other team's top line? In other words, Barkov's line, let's assume it's going to be Cirelli going at them with McDonough and Chernak in support, and then flip it. Who gets that matchup defensively?
Yeah. Look who's won the series, though. 2022. Yeah. I don't think Barkov had a goal. I mean, I'm trying to remember who scored for them. I remember Game 4 was a shutout. It was a Vasilevsky steal. But, I mean, the Panthers didn't score. They didn't score a lot of goals in that series. The Lightning swept the Panthers. 2021 was a high-scoring series and a high-chance series early, and then both teams kind of buckled down as the series progressed, but the Lightning won in 6. So I'd have to go back and actually, I guess for those 2 years, it'd be pretty easy to look up what the Panthers did, at least in that series. Last year was a different story. Last year, Barkov and company did very, very well in that series. I'm just going to look up Barkov because as he goes, the Panthers go. So 2022... Well, so 2022, the Lightning swept them, but it was in the second round. So he had 2 goals in 10 games, but I don't think he scored against the Lightning. In the previous year, he had 1 goal in 6 games. He did have, 6 assists, and I think those came early when the games were a little bit more high scoring. Last year, he finished with 22 points in 24 games, so he was basically a point-per-game guy.
Interesting.
So to answer your question, and this is kind of going to why I said what I said, if the Lightning's top players can do more damage than the Panthers' top players, which is kind of what I'm saying when I'm saying look at the plus-minus, and really it relates to 5-on-5, then the Lightning should be in good shape. And the opposite is also true. If the Panthers' top players are producing more than the Lightning's top players against the other team's best defensive players, then the Panthers are going to be in better shape. I believe that. I could be proven wrong. Maybe the Lightning win the series and we see, Kucherov didn't really get going in the series, but they got contributions from other guys.
They did.
And all of the Panthers' offense came from their top players. Like, we can have that happen. But if we're just looking general overview, I think that watch where the Lightning are vis-a-vis the Panthers in the 5-on-5 ratio, basically. Are the best plus-minus guys on the Lightning this year, those 4 guys I mentioned, able to continue that in this playoff series?
Outside of the goaltender, because I think everybody's going to be watching that, of course. You don't get good goaltending, you're probably not going to last long. Is there a matchup? Is that the matchup for you? Kind of the defensive stalwarts for each team and how they can neutralize the other team's top line? Is there a specific player you're going to look at. I mean, it could be Barkov. It could be the Lightning's. Hey, are the Lightning going 11-7?
I think they are.
I mean, that's an interesting. That's an interesting dynamic. You know,
they're also short at forward.
They are.
Just speaking plainly. So what I'm interested to see. This doesn't necessarily mean the team that struggles in this area more than the other is going to lose the series because the goalie is the X factor. But which team is giving up more dangerous chances up and down the lineup? So not just like the McDonough-Chernak matchup against the top Florida line, but also, you know, the 5-6 D pair on both teams against maybe a depth line for the other team. Are the Lightning giving up dangerous chances in front? Are the Panthers? Both teams finished the year with good defensive numbers. So you would figure that scoring chances are going to be hard to come by, but who the heck knows? I mean, like, it's the playoffs, right? You know, you can have breakdowns.
Right.
Are the Lightning able to find space in the offensive zone to create dangerous chances? And then if they can generate those, how is Bobrovsky handling those? And same with Vasilevsky.
Where did the Panthers finish on defense this year?
Well, I think they were 7th the last time I checked. By the way, just putting a bow on the Braden Point question. So this year, 48.5. Last year, he was 45.7. I didn't realize he was that low, and he played 81 games last year. That was by far his lowest percentage after his rookie year, which give him a pass on his rookie year. So his rookie year, he was 44.7. Year 2, he played all 82. He was 47.4. By the time we got to 18-19, he was in the 50s. So just over 50% 18-19, 51.1 in 2019-20. The short 2021 season, he was just under 50, 49.4. 21-22, he was 51. 22-23, he was 50.7. So that's 5 years where he was over 50% in 4 of them. But then he had the bad year last year, and I would call 48.5 not great. So I can check playoffs and see if they have his playoff face-off percentage. They do. So in the bubble, he went 57.7% on face-offs. The next year, when the Lightning won the Cup, he went 52.2%. So the year the Lightning got swept, he didn't have a lot of games, but he was at 54.3. But since then, he has been in the 40s. The last 3 years, he's been in the 40s. Now, 21-22, he didn't play a lot because he got hurt, right? So that needs to get better. I think we probably talked to Halpy in one of the years that the Lightning were going on to win the Stanley Cup, and Braden Point was, winning well over 50% of his faceoffs. Hopefully, he can rediscover that form. All right, you asked about where did the Panthers finish?
Yeah, I'm curious on this.
All right, Florida finished 7th, 2.72. Their 5-on-5 ratio, they were 1.12, tied for 9th. So not quite as good as the Lightning, but those are good numbers.
No, those are.
They're not
numbers.
bottom
That's
half.
Probably,
They're in the top 10.
Yeah, that's probably better than I thought.
I think they improved too in the second half of the year because in the middle part of the year they were right in the middle of the pack actually defensively.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would my next question about Point would be, okay, so let's compare the regular season face-off wins to postseason. Does he increase to the point that Halpern made to you where it's somewhat noticeable? Because that can be a little impactful as well.
Yeah.
And something to kind of monitor. So I do think face-offs, stating the obvious here, but I do feel like the Lightning have been a little bit more up and down this year in that category, and it's going to be something to keep an eye on, I think, for all of us in this series.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes a ton of sense. Do we want to get to some questions here?
Yeah, sure.
Even though we're taping this show, like I said, we'll have a lot of stuff for you this weekend, and then Mish and I will be back together on Monday. Anthony says, honestly, the playoff schedule is kind of bad. I don't know why we start Tuesday. Some series already will be at 2 games. League making sure Panthers can practice and dress a full roster. Starting times are also all over the place. Minnesota games start at 10 p.m. and 11 p.m.
Yeah, being in the central time zone and in the Western Conference can be tough. We've seen that before because they want a doubleheader. So actually, Anthony, the Lightning coaches are pretty happy with this Tuesday start. If you heard the interview, which I know you did, Greg, that I did with Rob Zettler after the first period last night, I asked him about the Tuesday start, and he's like, we were not happy about having this late game, late in the regular season, the final day, and late in that they were going to fly home, which we did after the game last night, and it wasn't quite like that other trip home from New York where we were sitting on the tarmac for a couple hours, but, still in the 2 o'clock in the morning window by the time I rolled into my driveway, and the Lightning didn't want to have to come back and start I don't think they were going to start on Saturday, but I don't think they were too crazy about starting on Sunday either. So, Anthony, the Lightning like the fact that they get some days here to rest up and practice and get ready for the series, and they have injured guys too. I mean, Bjorkstrand week to week, the couple extra days may not matter, but it may matter for Glendening. The fact that he was skating, we'll see. The 8:30 is so they're kind of front-loading the West because the only Western game last night was Calgary and L.A. That was a postponed game due to the fires in L.A. So originally, the entire Western Conference was going to be done on Wednesday. And some of the East was done on Wednesday, but most of the East was playing last night. At least most of the playoff teams were playing last night. So tomorrow, we only have 2 Western Conference games. It's going to get evened out, but I believe there may only be 2 Eastern series starting on Sunday. I know Toronto and Ottawa start on Sunday. I don't have the full schedule in front of me. But the reason why the Lightning are playing at 8:30 is that Carolina and New Jersey are playing at 6 on Tuesday. And that's an ESPN doubleheader. I did notice that. So, again, in the first round, we'll have FanDuel doing the games, but we'll also have national broadcasters there. So ESPN wants a doubleheader, and they want a doubleheader the way Tuesday's schedule is playing out. You got a lot of Eastern teams playing, I guess. Because I think you have Toronto and Ottawa playing game 2 as well.
Sure.
So that's why. That's why it's 8:30. The rest of the series, like the next game is 6:30 on Thursday?
I think you're right.
And then 1 o'clock in the afternoon for game 3 on Saturday. And because the Lightning and Panthers are going to almost be a game behind everybody else.
Yes.
There may be some series, the way they do it is they don't announce the start times after the first 4. But for the Lightning and Panthers, it's almost the first 3 because they are going to be in line with the other series that will have played 4. And if there's a sweep, let's say there's a series that TV is like, I think we want this game 5. What if there isn't a game 5? Then they move another game into that time slot. That's why it's TBD usually for the final 3. But for Lightning Panthers, it's the final 4. And those start times will get announced as other series either wrap up or don't. And then they slot the games in where they want them. They being the national television partners.
Anthony says one more thing that the team should address is goalie interference on Bobrovsky. He likes to flop around and overplay a contact, which Vasi never does. He also likes to drop his stick intentionally while making a save, which sometimes is a penalty. Good observation, Anthony. I think some people have noticed that.
Well, remember, the goalie interference is reviewed. So, I mean, you can try and sell it, but it may not work if they're watching on video replay. Also, goalies have reputations. So goalie interference can be a tricky call. It can be. I mean, we have tried on this show to explain best we can what they are looking for. But, by the way, we just got the practice schedule. We are pre-taping. So today is an off day and Sunday is an off day. The Lightning have a practice on Saturday. So they're working in some rest. They'll have a practice Saturday, and I'm sure they'll have a practice Monday. And then a morning skate on Tuesday. But 2 full practices and 2 full rest days. That's the advantage for the Lightning of waiting until Tuesday. Does it benefit the Panthers on some level too? Probably. and I know I went off the goalie interference topic, but I think we mentioned this last night as we were on the air, Greg, for the game broadcast. Sergei Bobrovsky will have, 8 days between starts? He played Monday. He's not going to play again until Tuesday night, the next week. So he and Vasi are going to kind of be in the same boat in terms of a layoff. And the Panther players will have had quite a bit of time off with no competitive games. In fact, a lot of the regulars didn't even play on Tuesday against the Lightning. Anyway, goalie interference, it can be controversial. Yes, I think that the league does try and follow kind of the guideline of the rule, but sometimes there is a gray area.
That's fair, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Al says if Kucherov doesn't win the Hart, it'll be a travesty. What else does he have to do?
I don't know that everyone who votes on the Hart is going to vote for Kucherov, but that's the way these votes go. There are a lot of voters. The writers, that's a big, big group. So
yeah,
there are going to be some people that pick McKinnon. I was chatting with Dan Rosen yesterday at the morning skate. No, he doesn't have a vote because he works for the league.
Yeah.
But he said if I had a vote, I would probably vote for McKinnon because of the upheaval that Colorado has had in terms of their lineup, which they had. Like they made a lot of changes this year, and the one consistent was McKinnon. Like when they, had injuries and then, they moved Rantanen and like McKinnon, he pulled out the stats of like how McKinnon was just a machine in terms of producing points for them as they were going through a lot of upheaval with the roster. So look, that's his opinion. He doesn't have a vote, but I mean, he advanced an argument pro McKinnon. There may be other people that look at what Draisaitl did in Edmonton with his goal production. He won the Rocket Richard by quite a bit. We talked about how top-heavy Edmonton was. We saw it.
Jack Michaels, right? I mean, he was.
Well, when we saw the Oilers in Tampa, they were kind of scuffling. But it was basically Draisaitl and McDavid carrying that team.
Yeah.
You can make an argument that Draisaitl was very, very valuable to Edmonton, even though he didn't have as many points as Kucherov. So, and then there are going to be other people who look at Kucherov and they're like, what else does he have to do?
And Hellebuck? Is this a year?
Hellebuck, if you decide to go that route, yep.
I mean, fantastic year.
I think there may be a pretty broad spectrum as compared to other years of like players getting votes. Last year, it seemed like it was going to be, Kucherov, McKinnon, and McDavid as the top three, and that's what it was.
Does Ryan McDonough get a vote?
I hope so. I hope he gets some votes from the Norris. I don't think it's likely to happen.
Likely
but
to happen.
He did finish plus 43, which led the NHL and set a Lightning record for best plus minus in a regular season.
More likely to happen, McDonough gets Norris Trophy consideration or MVP consideration. I don't know, but that number is
Norris, I think.
Probably.
Yeah. How about Braden Point for the Lady Bing? Pointer finished with 7. That's what he finished with. He's had a couple of years like that where he's had like 1 or 2 minor penalties and a fight.
I think, yeah, that's right. That's true.
Which may just automatically disqualify you for the Lady Bing.
Did Patrick Hornqvist get the Lady Bing the year that Phil looked at it and said, what?
Well, I'm not certain that he finished with 2 penalties.
How many minutes. Did he?
But we were a good way through the season. Like we were a good 55, 60 games in. He came in with 2 penalty minutes.
Should they throw away the Lady Bing award? I feel like that's an award that you don't want.
It's almost like the players
You're
want
not
to
getting
decline
penalties.
that. Pointer finished with 7 penalty minutes, 1 minor penalty, and a fight.
I think, honestly, I think that's probably an award I wouldn't want.
He fought Bobby McMahon in that late game against Toronto.
It's kind of a lame award. The name doesn't give you any, Lady Bing, I don't know. I think let's retire that one and let's come up with best defensive defenseman.
Yeah.
Let's do away with the
Lady
Bing.
Well, they have the best defensive forward, the Selke.
Okay, so there's a good question.
Yeah.
So they've got a defensive award for a forward, but they don't for a defenseman. Right? I mean, am I missing something here?
You're right.
That doesn't make any sense. Add that to the list of Gregisms we can put in the broadcast. Why don't they have a defensive defenseman award? If you're going to have one for the forwards, I mean, the defenseman's job, he's the last line of defense beyond the goaltender. Why wouldn't you have that? I mean, can you imagine all the players you could have rewarded? And you know who would like this even more? The agents of these players.
Yep.
Hey, my guy, 5 out of the last 6 years, was a finalist for the best defensive defenseman. Okay, we can actually watch that. We can say, you know what, Ryan McDonough has consistently been in the top 5 as best defensive defensemen in the league. You could put Slavin in there. You could put, Theodore in there. You could,
Forsling, yeah.
Forsling would probably win it a couple of years. I mean, this is something that needs to be done. Actually, let's call Jared. I want Gary Bettman on the show, and I want to talk to him. Is he going to be? He may be poking around different arenas.
Yeah,
throughout
he
the playoffs.
usually makes the rounds in the first round. I don't know if he's going to come to Tampa or to Sunrise.
I got to think he comes to Tampa to see Phil.
He does
First
like
round,
Phil.
And he will talk to Phil. Like Phil could probably.
I'm
do
not sure if he's going to show up for the 8:30 face-off on Tuesday, though.
But he's somebody
We'll
that
see.
Phil. He's somebody that'll listen to Phil. Like Phil can get away with saying some.
Phil
things
can
to
get
the
away
commissioner,
with it,
right?
for sure. Yes.
And that's always a dynamic. So maybe if he comes on, we'll have that. But yeah, I'm gonna petition. I'll petition the league for that and the broken sticks. We need to clean that up. I have seen some officials do a better job of that recently, picking up the broken stick. But especially come playoff time, you got to pick that off and you got to get it out, and we'll kind of see.
And a helmet too. Like
That
if the player
rule needs to
isn't
be
picking
changed.
up the helmet, the official should pick up the helmet.
Who was the player that it was? Mo Sider.
Mo
right?
Sider, he went to the bench.
He didn't know what to do. By the way, if you watch that play, he didn't. He hesitated. It's like he wanted to stay, and then he wanted to go get the helmet, and then he left. He didn't know it, and it cost his team a goal.
Yeah.
That's a dumb rule on a lot of different levels. I mean, look, it's like in baseball. If your helmet comes off running the bases, what are you going to do? Stop and go back to second base while you're rounding, going to third? I mean, it's just part of the game. There's some things you can't prevent from happening. You just can't sometimes. And a player, there's been a history there in the NHL where players have played without a helmet. And I know you want to be super protective of the athlete, but I almost feel we've gotten to the point right now where you're doing things that can kind of impact the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of them.
It can impact the game.
Yeah. I mean, partner, there are risks with everything, with every sport. I know they've tried to go to the neck guard.
And that's the player's choice.
And
but
that's
there's
a
no
player's
choice in
choice.
this matter when the helmet pops off.
And I just wonder why, because the chances of we've seen athletes in head issues when it comes to that.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think the concern. So yeah, you could take a body check and hit the ice. The concern is that you hit the ice. I think you're more likely to hit the ice in that way when you're in a fight. And sometimes in a fight, the helmet
100%.
does come off.
Well, the players take the helmets off now. Have you noticed that? Like a lot of times when they drop the gloves, the helmet comes off and then they want to throw punches.
I think
don't
it
know if
usually
there's a
pops
penalty.
off from the other player, but maybe you're right
that's
about
another
that.
discussion. But that's another
Yeah.
discussion. I mean, if you're really
Anyway.
worried about hits to the head, you're going to take out fighting because of
Yeah.
what you said. But that's another rule. I mean, could you imagine the playoffs? See, they should do away with that rule in the playoffs because of the level of desperation. Your helmet comes off, you stay. Because
well,
most
by
players
your
are gonna
logic, they're doing away with all these other rules. They're not calling penalties when they
Right.
should.
But I mean, like, that's one where, we talk about desperation. Can you imagine if you're a defenseman and your helmet comes off and it's 2 minutes to go in a game, the other team's pressing, and you're trying to block? Are you really going to go to the bench? You're going to do everything you can to stay on there and help your teammates. Like, I think it's something to kind of keep an eye on. But I get frustrated a little bit with some of that. Doesn't make sense. Al also, before we let everybody go, he says, okay, I get it. It's game 82. It's meaningless, but why not treat it like a high-intensity practice? Work on weaknesses like face-offs or D-zone coverage. Just going through the motions and being sloppy doesn't ingrain good habits. I hope they can flip that switch. Oh, Al is never satisfied.
Yeah, they
I
have been
love Al.
sloppier. Al, I actually thought that they did okay in the first period. I mean, they held
Yeah.
the Rangers to 5 shot attempts.
Yes.
Gonsalves hit the post. Rangers made some plays in the third period. The game got away from them. I wouldn't read too much into it.
Listen, if
they'll
the
be ready to
Lightning-
go for game one.
If the Lightning struggle on Tuesday, it's not going to be because of this game against the Rangers. It's just not. Just not. In fact, I've already forgotten the game against the Rangers. That's not, you know what? The
You
best
have that.
part,
You have that short-term memory
I
in a
really
good
do.
way.
I really do. You know, the
You're
best
like
part,
Ted Lasso says, the goldfish, right?
Yeah, right. The best part about yesterday was the fact that we got to interview Sam Rosen.
Yes.
I mean, that really was.
And he was fed it at the game. That was great
Good
to
for
see.
him.
Yeah,
Good for him.
For
good
sure.
guy. Good for him. Before we sign off, I have to do a read. Come to Centro Ybor tonight from 6 to 9 for a Lightning pop-up event. Exclusive pop-up store with limited edition swag at Playoff Yard. Is that Playoff Yard sings and free swag? Walk the blue
Yard
carpet.
signs, maybe.
It's it's SINGS. Am I reading that incorrectly?
The yard sings.
The yard.
It's like a
sings?
cartoon sign.
Walk the blue gambit. Guest appearance by
Now
Ryan Malone.
that is worth going to Centro Ybor. If you
go.
weren't going, you're like, I'm not into pop-ups. Go see the singing signs, the yard signs
The
that
yard
sing.
sings with Ryan Malone. Free performance by international music artist. No, I did ask the guys before this. It's Ambrose.
Yeah,
I haven't
I've
heard
done
of
that
it,
read
Ambrose.
too. My read though had signs spelled correctly, so
Yeah, why would it be different on mine? I don't know.
I don't
Maybe.
know.
For more info, call TampaBayLightning.com/2025 playoffs. Hey, Jared, I got you. You got to proofread this stuff. Proofread it, man. You
By
know,
the
I'm-
way, we can tell everyone Bobby Fenton's going to be with me tomorrow on the
Yes,
Saturday Power
that'll be
Lunch
fun.
show. Bobby's always a lot of fun to talk to.
Yes.
He loves numbers. So, I mean, I like numbers.
Yeah.
I've done some numbers today, right? Talking about the defensive
Bobby
numbers.
does love numbers.
Bobby
He will get into
loves
it.
numbers. I think because
He will
part
get
of
into it.
his work when he works for, like he's in press boxes sometimes.
Good point.
Helping broadcast, he does stats. If I'm not mistaken, I think he does stats. He's a numbers guy. So it'll be
He
fun
does
to-
love stats. He will.
fun to do
He will
the-
get
the
into
show
some
with
numbers.
Bobby.
Yeah, he'll get to do some numbers.
He
He'll
even
be-
has a segment when we had him do a show in the playoffs called Numbers Corner. So
Ooh.
he may pull that one. He may dust that one off.
and Bobby will be
on the
wearing
show
t-shirts
tomorrow.
and shorts.
Yeah.
That's his thing, which I always love when I see Bobby in the press box. He's like very casual.
I'm
goes
in
about
a
his business.
t-shirt today, but I tell you what, Greg, like even though we live in Florida and it gets very, very hot, I am usually, when I'm not just being outside, I usually am not wearing shorts because I get cold. I think they blast the air
Yeah.
conditioning.
You're wearing pants.
in a lot of public
Yeah.
areas.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah,
jeans, but I mean,
yeah, right.
well, I'm getting old. My bones are getting cold, man. Go to the movie theater, bundle up, bring a blanket.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, we keep our house at about 72, 73. Is that cold for you? Would that be
That's
cold?
a degree or two colder than what we
Okay.
keep it.
Yeah.
And there are some people who are like, I got to keep it at 67.
I'm
like,
at 80.
Oh my gosh.
I'd be sweating. Yeah, I'd be
Yeah.
sweating. There's no question about it.
Anyway, Bobby doesn't seem affected by that.
No,
but
no.
he's a native Floridian, so maybe
is.
he's down with that.
He is. Partner, we'll be getting it done on Monday, but have fun tomorrow and Sunday with Bobby.
Yep.
Happy Easter to everybody.
Yeah. Happy
And
Easter.
we
Lightning
will,
get the full weekend off.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Be kind of recharging the battery a little bit. And thanks to everybody who joined us this week. A lot of good guests. We played that throughout the broadcast, which I thought was a nice
Yep.
little touch to it. So that was good stuff by Jared as well. Thanks to Steve Verslick. Thanks to you for listening. We always appreciate you guys. Don't forget Power Lunch tomorrow and Sunday. Mish and I will be back together on Monday, noon to 1, right here on Lightning Radio.